In 1839, the first commercial camera was released. At the time, the process of taking a photo was too difficult. Even after 40 years during the 1880s, the situation didn't change. A lot of accessories were needed for photography. The camera itself was as big as a microwave oven. The use of chemicals in the process made photography impossible for ordinary people. A 24-year-old bank employee named George Eastman wanted to bring some change. He decided to research on how he could simplify the camera, even though he was a school dropout who had never studied chemistry. After struggling for almost a decade, inventing a new method, building a company, almost losing the company, finally in 1888, he succeeded at creating a camera so simple that it changed the whole photography industry. Have you ever looked at old photographs from the 19th century and thought, why do the people in the pictures look so serious? None of them are smiling and they kinda look uncomfortable. At the time, smiling in front of the camera was considered foolish. Besides, early cameras came with a long exposure time. It could be from 5 seconds to a few minutes depending on the lighting conditions. Keeping the same facial expression for so long was really uncomfortable. Sometimes the photographer used a headstand so that the model could stay still. A little change in the facial expression could ruin the whole photo. So it was preferred to be serious or expressionless while posing in front of the camera. Photography was difficult at that time, not only for the person in front of the camera, but also for the person behind the camera. Early photographers had to form a light-sensitive emulsion by pouring layers of chemicals on a glass plate. The whole process had to be done in a dark room, as light would ruin the light-sensitive surface. The glass plate had to be exposed inside the camera while it was still wet. That's why the process was called the wet collodion process. The photographers got only 15 minutes before the plate dried out, so it wasn't possible to travel far with a prepared glass plate, and they had to come back to a dark room in order to prepare another plate. Despite all the difficulties, early photographers traveled far with their tents and collected photographs from around the world. During the 1880s, a bank employee named George Eastman realized photography was too difficult. Ordinary people who didn't have any knowledge about chemicals couldn't even think of buying a camera and start taking pictures. Besides, the accessories needed for photography were too expensive. Overall, it was only limited to professional photographers. Eastman wanted to bring some change. He decided to research on how he could make photography easier, even though he was a school dropout who had never studied chemistry. George Eastman was born on 12 July 1854 in Waterville, New York. His father owned a small business school in Rochester, New York. When George was 5-year-old, his family moved to Rochester. At the age of 8, George was studying in a private school when his father passed away due to some brain disease. His mother found out that George's father had left no money for them. She started taking care of boarders in order to support the family. It was difficult for her to support the family and continue Eastman's education at the same time. At the age of 14, Eastman dropped out of school to support his family. He started working in insurance companies as a messenger and office boy. He was also studying accounting at home so that he could qualify for higher salary jobs. At the age of 24, he was working as a bookkeeper in a bank when he became interested in photography. He was planning a trip to Santo Domingo and decided to document the whole trip, but he didn't have any equipment for photography. He bought the equipment and couldn't figure out what to do with them. He had to pay $5 to a local photographer who taught him how to use the camera. For some reason, the trip could never happen, but Eastman grew a passion for photography. Eastman didn't like the wet process. It is said that during one trip, the chemicals used in the process ruined his clothes. After the incident, he became determined to find an alternative process. He found a formula for dry plate emulsion published in a British publication. Using the formula, he started experimenting with dry plates. During the day, he worked at the bank and experimented in his mother's kitchen at night. At some nights, he used to be so tired that his mother found him sleeping on the floor. After 3 years of experimenting, he finally succeeded in formulating a dry plate emulsion. Soon, he leased the 3rd floor of a building in Rochester and started manufacturing dry plates. Seeing the potential of the dry plates, businessman Henry Alva Strong showed interest in investing in his business. On January 1, 1881, Eastman partnered with Henry Alva Strong and founded the Eastman Dry Plate Company. Later that year, he left his job at the bank to devote all his time to the company. While actively managing all the affairs of the company, Eastman continued his research. He wanted to make the camera, in his words, as convenient as a pencil. Eastman's next approach was to replace the glass plates. Glass was heavy to carry around, and they could easily break. He wanted to coat the chemicals on paper to create an emulsion on it. But being a school dropout and a self-taught chemist, he didn't have the knowledge needed for further research. So he hired a young chemist named Henry Reichenberg who helped him to invent the paper film. Eastman then loaded the film into a roll holder. The roll holder could fit inside all the cameras on the market. With the roll film, the photographers didn't have to change the glass plate after every exposure. They could just roll to the next film. Eastman thought the roll holder would finally bring the commercial success to his company. He wrote to his mother, "Now you don't have to take care of boarders anymore." The roll holder was praised by the critics. It got a lot of awards, but most professional photographers didn't buy the paper film because of the image quality produced by it. It couldn't meet the standards of dry plate cameras. The roll film didn't bring the commercial success Eastman expected. While he concentrated on the paper film and the roll holder, other companies came up with better dry plates. The Eastman company was on the verge of an end. Suddenly, Eastman got an amazing idea. He thought if he could create a camera for the ordinary people, they would not care so much about the image quality. They just needed a simple camera which could be used without learning the complicated process behind it. In 1888, Eastman released the first Kodak camera. It was a simple box camera with a fixed lens and a spatial shutter that could take pictures in a fraction of a second. It had enough film loaded inside for 100 exposures. The camera was priced at $25. After the films were done, the whole camera had to be sent back to the Kodak company, where the photographs were printed and the camera was loaded with more films for an additional $10. All you needed to do to click a picture was to press the button. This became the tagline for Kodak. You press the button, we do the rest. At first, no one could believe it. Early users of the Kodak camera didn't even realize if their pictures were actually being taken. But once the pictures came back from the company, they were stunned. Suddenly, you didn't need to be skilled at the complicated chemical process to be a photographer. Whether you're inside your house or outside, having fun at the beach, or spending a great time with your family that is worth remembering later, you could just take out your Kodak camera and press the button. Another secret behind the success of Kodak was the name of it. Eastman came up with the name himself. He believed the name of a product has to be simple, which can be remembered easily. It must not have a meaning or association with another product. The name Kodak became so popular that any moment that was worth taking a picture was called a Kodak moment. Finally, Eastman got the success he was waiting for. He successfully started an era of amateur photography. By 1994, the quality of the Kodak film improved so much that even professional photographers started using them. And a new industry began because of photographic film, the motion picture industry. In 1900, Eastman introduced another camera, the Brownie. It was a cheaper version of the Kodak, which cost only $1. It was aimed at a new group of customers, children. Eastman thought if a generation of children get introduced to photography through these cheaper cameras, they will also buy expensive cameras after growing up. Soon the company's profits soared, and Eastman was listed as the 6th richest man of the country. Eastman never married and donated a lot of money for the betterment of the society. He was a major philanthropist of his time, establishing 2 music schools and schools of dentistry. With interest in improving health, he provided funds for clinics in London and other European cities to serve low-income residents. He made major donations for a lot of universities including MIT. During the last 2 years of his life, he was in intense pain due to a disorder affecting his spine. On March 14, 1932, Eastman shot himself in the heart, leaving a note to his closest friends. "My work is done. Why wait?"